Hi, this is Justin Martin with Paradigm Life. Today I'm going to be talking about the three wealth destroyers and how they've impacted American wealth for well over 100 years. They impact it today and they will impact it in the future unless we make some significant changes to our overall financial objectives. Okay, now I'm going to be using my tablet and some calculators here today, so follow along with me. So we're talking about the wealth destroyers. Okay. Now the first one that we're going to be talking about here today is inflation. Now, by definition, inflation is the devaluation of the purchasing power of money, which means that money today, if there's inflation, will not buy what that same amount will buy in the future. So for example, we know that the cost of a gallon of milk today, 5 years down the road, will not be the same. We know it's going to more than likely be more money. And that's just due to inflation. Now here in the United States, the average inflation rate is about 3.5%. Okay? Some will argue that it's much more than that. Some will argue that it's a little bit less than that. For today, we're going to be using 3.5%. Okay? The second wealth destroyer we're going to be discussing today is taxes. Okay? There are many different forms of taxes: consumption taxes, income taxes, sales taxes. So the taxes that we're going to be talking about here is the overall taxes. If we just collectively gathered them, we know that taxes eat away also at wealth. They destroy wealth. Okay, so we'll be looking at taxes kind of as an ongoing basis over time, that there are taxes also working against our wealth. The third item that we're going to be discussing today is fee structure. Okay. Most wealth today is accumulated in financial products. Comes from the fees that are built into that product. We know that financial products are not sold for free. Okay? And that fee structure erodes away at the potential investment gains that someone can get out of that product. So the fees are a part of one of the financial powers that are destroying our ongoing wealth. All right? So for today, to illustrate these three financial powers, we're going to be looking at a simple graph here. Okay. In this graph, we have on the y-axis, we're going to put on this y-axis money. Okay. On the x-axis here, we're going to put time, and let's say this is time in years. Okay. For the example we're going to use today, we're going to say we're going to take $100 and we're going to say let's grow this $100 over a 100-year period at an interest rate. Okay? So if you take $100, you invest it, and it grows for 100 years at a certain interest rate, then we get what we attribute to Albert Einstein is compound, a compound interest. Okay, we get this graph that begins this growth. It looks and appears to be slow at first, but then we get this point in time where we hit kind of the quick growth, or we call this the hockey stick pinnacle, where it starts to take off. Okay, so we're going to be taking again $100 over a 100-year period. Now we know that compounding interest is something that's more theoretical. There's always going to be disruptions in that type of a curve. Well, we're talking about three of those disruptions today. Okay, so we have inflation, number one, that's coming into play, that's going to erode away. We've got taxes that are going to erode away some more of that wealth. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the fees that are also associated. Okay. To get a little bit more accurate with numbers, let's actually back up the calendar 100 years. And we're going to go backwards 100 years, and we're going to say this is your great-great Uncle Charlie. Okay, and he has $100, and he's going to take that $100, he's going to go to a financial planner, and he's going to say, hey, financial planner, I hear you've got some type of investment out there that's going to give me 20% growth. Financial planner says, yes, it will. You're going to get 20% growth. So let me grab a calculator here. All right. See if I can keep this in my screen here. All right, there we go. Okay, so we're going to say over a 100-year period, we're getting a 20%. We're getting a 20% growth over that 100-year period, and we're starting out with $100. Okay, so $100 goes in, we get 20% growth that year, so $20 in earnings. At the end of that year, we've got $120. And thus it builds over time. We're not adding any more money to this. We're just doing the $100 growing over time. We really start to see this compound. Well, 100 years later, our great-great Uncle Charlie now has, if you look at this number here down at the bottom, the end of year account value. Sorry for the small numbers there. But we showed that we have now grown the money. This financial planner has now grown that money to $8.2, almost $8.3 billion. So $100 just grew to, 100 years later, $8.2 billion. Okay, pretty tremendous growth. I think we would all buy into that. Right? But now let's take a look here. And we know that we've got some inflation here. We've got this inflation that's working against us, right? We know that the cost of goods is going to be more expensive down the road. So let's just take here inflation, and let's put in this average inflation rate in the US of 3.5%. And let's watch to see what happens with that bottom line number. Our $8.2 billion has now become $265 million. Okay, so inflation, due to inflation, our investment, or this investment, 265, that investment that our great-great Uncle Charlie used just went from 8.2 billion down to 265 million. Still a great, still a great investment. 265, I think we'd all say, yeah, let's take it. Okay, now we're gonna go down now to the second wealth destroyer here and start talking about taxes. Now again, there's, like I was discussing earlier, there's a lot of different taxes. There's different tax rates. We're in a marginal tax system, but let's just say overall 25% is what is taxed. Okay, in whatever form this comes in, 25% of our growth is taxed in some form or other, which according to the average tax rates out there may be just a little bit low. Where did my calculator go? Let's pull it back up here again. Here we go. Okay, so we're just going to use a 25% tax. Let me throw that in here. So when putting that 25% tax in, we have now gone from that 265 million down to 3.7 million. Okay, so we've lost well over 98% of our money. Did I say 2.8? 3 point, well, sorry about that. 3.7 million. Okay. Just by the first two wealth destroyers. Now, I wish we could stop there, but we know that there's other things eating away at our wealth. Okay, we've got fees also associated with all of this. Now, we can look at fees in a lot of different ways. Let's just look at the most common type of financial product out there right now, and that is your classic mutual fund, your Fidelity mutual fund, okay, or whatever type of mutual fund it may be. Now, built into those mutual funds are a lot of different types of fees. You have your trading fees, your drag fees, your transactional fees, managerial fees. There's a lot of different fees built in there. And over time, typically, depending on what that product is, typically we see that fee structure for it to be a profitable type of product. That fee is typically going to be somewhere between 1% to 3%. Okay, maybe a little bit higher if it's within a 401k plan. Who knows? For our example today, let's just find a number somewhere in the middle. Let's just go a 2.5% fee. Okay, 2.5%. At 2.5%, we've now dropped down to $521,000. Okay, so $521,000. So we went from this compounding curve giving us $8.2 billion, adding in these three wealth destroyers that disrupt that curve, and now our investment went down to $521,000. Okay, so we've lost well over 99% of the kind of growth that we could have. Now, all three of these, inflation, taxes, and fees, are items that we can't get around. However, there are ways that we can plan properly to mitigate as much of those types of destroyers as we can. It's important out there to save your money, to invest your money, and to find good rates of return for your money. But just as important it is to earn money, it is just equally as important to protect that money. Okay, so inflation, taxes, and fees are items that we need to be thinking about all the time. Now, let me go back 10 minutes ago and point out one important aspect that some of you may have caught too, and that is to say 20%. Is 20% a reasonable rate of return? No, that financial planner is not going to be able to get that person 20% year over year for 100 years. If so, all of us would jump into that product and all of us would become billionaires, right? That's not an actual number. What we need to say is, no one can predict the market. Everyone's crystal ball is broken and we can't really predict what's going to happen. But what if we took this same information now and we said, well, let's take a look at the last 100 years and plug that item and plug that number in there. Okay, so if we just pulled up here the market history, and let's take a look. The S&P 500 hasn't been around for 100 years, but the Dow Jones has. So what if we took the Dow Jones over the last 100 years, okay, and plugged that number in? Okay, we know it's been an average. Let's go. We know that it's been an average of 7.4%, but what does that mean over time? Okay, so the market's fluctuating up and down. So let's come back to my other graph here. And instead of this 20% earnings rate, I'm going to plug in here these values and say, okay, the market's down, the market's up, the market's down, the market's up. All right, we get the Great Depression, we get World War II, we get the 1970s and 80s, we get 9/11, we get the recent financial crisis, okay? So we have market values in here now, and we've got the three wealth destroyers. Well, what is our bottom number here? $39. So after 100 years, what happened to that $100? Left over with $39. Okay. So again, as we're looking at where to put our money and what to do with our money, we need to be very careful with the ways that our monies are going to be destroyed by inflation, taxes, and fees, and also the investment vehicles of where we're putting that money. All right. Now there are some quick and easy ways to start to properly plan for inflation, taxes, and fees, and market fluctuation. That's a part of this perpetual wealth strategy that we've been discussing and that you've been viewing in other videos. So please contact me, give me a call if you haven't already. Let's set up some time to start looking at this. Okay, or if you have any questions in regards to this video, let me know. You got my contact information there, or also a link in this YouTube video. You can click on that to contact me directly through our website. Okay, thank you, and we'll see you on the next video.